from our State House studio in Montgomery. I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. We are just a few days away from the start of the 2025 regular session of the Alabama legislature. Lawmakers will gavel into session at noon on Tuesday, February 4th. And later that evening, hear from Governor Kay Ivey as she delivers the State of the State address from the Capitol. Of course, we will be carrying the governor's speech live here on Alabama Public Television. Our coverage begins at 5:30 and will include the speech at 6 o'clock, the Democratic response after that, and then some reaction to it all here in our Capitol Journal studio. Hope you will join us. Lawmakers have been busy this week preparing for the start of the session. In the House of Representatives, the Republican and Democratic caucuses rolled out their legislative agendas with some competing ideas, but also some similarities. Randy Scott covers the House for Capitol Journal.
Representative Scott Stadhagen serves as the House Majority Leader and says his caucus is ready to unveil its Alabama Values Agenda, covering items such as boosting Alabama's economy and job numbers.
Anything we can do to promote business and increase jobs that we have, that would be great.
Across the aisle, the House Democrats released their Forward for Freedom agenda, also addressing economic needs.
We're supporting an economic environment that benefits hard-working Alabamians like you. That means increasing investment in child care, transportation, and housing for you and your family and for the community.
Both parties have ideas for other topics, such as education.
Now we're starting to realize you could leave or start a trade in high school or getting trained to do a trade in high school and then after graduation come out making really good money.
We support increasing pay for educators and ensuring they have the resources and support they need to help children succeed. I repeat, we support increasing pay for educators and ensuring they have the resources and support they need to help children succeed.
Also, fighting crime and gun violence.
Particularly in two cities that we're dealing with, Montgomery being one, Birmingham being the other. Real excited about that. I think the protection of our citizens, for them to feel safe going around their own city, is very important.
We can do that without infringing upon the rights of gun owners, while at the same time recognizing our responsibility to ensure that our children can go to school, that our seniors can go to the grocery store without fear of violence and death.
The regular session starts Tuesday, February 4th. For Capitol Journal, I'm Randy Scott.
Thank you, Randy. Senators spent the week preparing for session as well. Jeff Sanders covers the Senate for Capitol Journal, and he caught up with the leaders of both parties to see what they're planning for next week.
When lawmakers gavel back into session next week, leaders from both parties say they're ready to get to work. Republican Senate Majority Leader Steve Livingston says immigration remains a priority. But with a Republican-led federal government, state action may not be as urgent. He also highlights efforts to expand rural health care and improve school safety.
Trying to make sure that all the Alabamians have access to rural health care, whether you're in Huntsville, Birmingham, Montgomery, or Mobile. School safety is a big target, obviously, for us. A cell-free zone at schools, something to do with youth vaping.
On the Democratic side, Senate Minority Leader Bobby Singleton warns that while national issues could impact Alabama, he's calling for stronger crime legislation and gun safety measures, pointing to recent violence as a serious concern.
Because there was a shooting just last week, and not one mumbling word came out. You know, it was more about detaining people versus being able to deal with gun control.
And with new leadership in the Senate, Senator Singleton says he expects bipartisan cooperation to continue.
I don't expect anything to change in terms of relationships from what we did with Marsh and Reed, now with Gurger.
Meanwhile, the issue of gambling could come up once again. However, Senator Livingston says any potential legislation still faces a long road ahead.
You know, the speaker has put us on notice. He said, don't send us anything that doesn't look remotely similar to what we sent y'all last year, because we're not going to bring it up. So we'll see what we do.
Reporting from the State House, I'm Jeff Sanders for Capital Journal.
Thank you, Jeff. The nation's report card was released this week, and it came with some good news for Alabama. The National Assessment of Education Progress is given every 2 years to a sample of 4th graders and 8th graders to measure their education progress. While scores showed students in many states continuing to struggle with learning loss, Alabama showed progress, especially in the early grades. Alabama 4th graders made the most gains in math of any state in the country, climbing 8 spots to rank 32nd nationally. That's after ranking dead last just 5 years ago. Reading scores among Alabama 4th graders remained flat, but still ranked 34th nationally. Alabama is one of only 2 states where 4th grade reading scores are higher now than they were before the pandemic. Not as promising news for the state's 8th graders. Math scores fell slightly, ranking Alabama 49th nationally, and 8th grade reading scores dropped to their lowest levels ever, ranking Alabama 47th nationally. At an event announcing the scores, Governor Kay Ivey focused on the positive, saying the progress made by the state's 4th graders shows the state's investment in early grade reading and math are paying off.
Ever since I've taken office, we have put a strong and needed emphasis on our students' educational journey. Very appropriately, I've often referred to literacy and numeracy acts as the blocking and tackling of Alabama education. You can't win without them. And thanks to our collective efforts to focus on those fundamentals, the score is changing. When I took office, Alabama ranked 49th in reading. Today, we're at 34. And in math, when I took office, Alabama ranked 52nd. And today, we are 32.
State Superintendent Eric Mackey said the state will need to place a greater focus on middle school learning, similar to how the Literacy Act and Numeracy Act focused on early grades.
We are not where we want to be. We obviously have a lot of growth that we want to continue to have in both math and reading and all of our other subjects. But the NAEP scores show that we have the right strategies, we are on the right path, we are making the right investments, and we're going to continue to move forward. We know from these scores also that some of our students continue to struggle. Our middle school students, as across this nation, continue to kind of be flat, and we want to continue as we work in middle school and high school. We're going to see some new investments. One of the things, again, Governor Ivey and this board pushed last year for us to create a new program we're calling Struggling Readers Beyond Grade 3, to make sure that those students who are moving into the middle grades and are not yet proficient in where we want them to be, that we're continuing to offer them extra services.
Coming up here in a bit, APT senior education reporter Trish Crane will join me to discuss those NAEP scores in more detail as part of our education update. This week saw the latest meeting of the Veterans Mental Health Steering Committee here in the State House. The group is finalizing proposals for how the state can improve mental health outcomes for veterans, including in areas like addiction, traumatic brain injury, and suicide prevention. Alabama Commissioner of Mental Health, Kim Boswell, said the task force will offer their research-based recommendations to the governor and the legislature.
It would be a fabulous idea to have an Alabama Veterans Resource Center in the state. The mission is to serve as a one-stop center that prioritizes rapid workforce reintegration for Alabama veterans and their families through a job-first strategy. It would also include integrated health and behavioral health care and access and support for veteran-to-veteran connections. The second is expand traumatic brain injury services in Alabama. What this would do is expand traumatic brain injury services to people regardless of when they sustain their brain injury. What this would do is expand that program so that no matter when the brain injury occurred, you would be able to receive the services of a nationally recognized traumatic brain injury program that operates in Alabama. The third is something that we've talked about in a couple of meetings, implement the Storing Ammunition and Firearms to Enhance Resiliency Together program in Alabama. That is an opportunity. We know from the data that the more time you can put between the individual and their access to a weapon decreases the suicide rate. So we are very, very excited about that. There's draft legislation. These are recommendations that we felt like we didn't have to wait on the completion of a comprehensive plan in order to make these recommendations. They are very important, and as we lead up to the legislative session beginning, we really would like to present these as 3 preliminary recommendations from the committee.
Alabama was at the forefront of the conversation on artificial intelligence this week. Experts from across the country gathered for the 2nd annual AI Symposium at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center's Space Camp Institute in Huntsville. The 3-day event explored how AI is shaping industries such as medicine, law, cybersecurity, space exploration, and even baseball. Space and Rocket Center Executive Director Dr. Kimberly Robinson said the goal is to help people better understand the impact of AI on everyday life.
Huntsville, Alabama and North Alabama have been the home of great strides forward. And so one of them happened to be the leap that we made when we put mankind on the moon. And so likewise, we want to continue that tradition and be the home of the next strides forward. And we feel that artificial intelligence is the next great leap that we're going through. Well, I hope they understand the impact of artificial intelligence on their daily lives in so many ways. So we're trying to cover the gamut so that they can really understand the full spectrum of AI. And it's not just about, say, better stats in baseball, but it's about a way of life and how it will infiltrate everything that we do moving forward. And so we've already seen it in some aspects, in some industries, but we're going to continue to see it more and more. So the more we can understand it, the more that we can embrace it, the more that we can understand how to harness it and control it, the better off we'll be.
Turning now to Washington, where it was another busy week for Alabama's 2 Republican senators. Both Senator Tommy Tuberville and Senator Katie Britt were in the middle of all the action, taking part in confirmation hearings for some of President Donald Trump's most controversial nominees. Tuberville questioned Robert Kennedy Jr., who's nominated for Health and Human Services Secretary. Britt questioned Kash Patel, nominee for FBI Director. Our Washington correspondent, Alex Engel, reports from Capitol Hill on how those senators impacted the debate.
Lines stretched outside hearing room doors as some of President Trump's most controversial nominees took the stand during confirmation hearings this week. Thursday was a busy day for Alabama senators. Senator Katie Britt applauded Kash Patel in the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing.
You said our law enforcement officers deserve the very best. You said you know and you will not allow there to be victims of government overreach because it has happened to you.
Britt highlighted the positive things Patel said he would do as FBI director and gave him a chance to explain how he would run the agency.
1, let good cops be cops. To restore the trust in the FBI.
In her second round of questioning, Britt touted FBI's presence at Redstone Arsenal, and Patel committed to visiting it.
There has been over $4 billion invested there. It is truly remarkable.
While Britt was praiseworthy, Democrats questioned Patel on his independence from Trump and his past comments on retribution and praising January 6th rioters. In the next door building, Tuberville questioned Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in his Health Committee hearing to lead the Department of Health and Human Services. Tuberville said he also supports RFK's stances on vaccines.
I've had my first granddaughter here in a couple of weeks, and my son and his wife have done their research about vaccines, and she's not going to be a pincushion. We're not going to allow that to happen.
Tuberville also questioned the nominee on the dangers of red dye number 3 and the overprescription of drugs to treat attention deficit disorders.
When you and I were growing up, our parents didn't use a drug, they used a belt and whipped our butt, and told us to sit down. Nowadays, we give them Adderall and Ritalin.
Kennedy told Tuberville he is the best person to lead the agency to help fix those issues. The committees will now vote on the nominees. Kennedy had 2 hearings, one in the Senate Finance Committee and one at the Health Committee. Tuberville's a part of the Health Committee. Only the Finance Committee, though, is going to vote on that nomination. But after the committees vote, both of those nominees will head to the full Senate for a vote. Reporting on Capitol Hill, Alex Engel, Capitol Journal.
Thank you, Alex. One more update on committee assignments for Alabama's congressional delegation. This time, some big pickups for our senators. Senator Tuberville will chair the Senate Armed Services Subcommittee on Personnel, which oversees that area of Pentagon policy. Senator Britt will chair the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee on Homeland Security, which will be a busy job considering all that's happening in the immigration space. Okay, we'll take a quick break and come back with Trish Crane to talk about those education scores. After that, House Speaker Nathaniel Ledbetter is in studio for a preview of the legislative session. Senator Chris Elliott joins me a little later to talk about an ambitious immigration package in the works. And finally, State Representative Juandalynn Givan will be in studio to talk about addressing violent crime in Alabama cities. Stay with us.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capitol Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal and to our education update with senior education reporter Trish Crane. Trish, thanks for coming on the show.
Good to see you, Todd.
Well, it's a big one this week. We reported earlier the National Assessment of Education Progress, colloquially known as the Nation's Report Card. Results came out this week, and some big news for Alabama, especially on math scores for 4th graders. Talk about that.
Yeah, you know, it's not a position we often find ourselves in the NAEP to be at the top of the scorecard, but our gains, our 4th grade math gains, put us at the top of the list of gains, right? Growth. Improvement.
Wow.
Yes, yeah. So that was really exciting, and you know, education folks are very excited. Governor Ivey did a joint press conference with State Superintendent Eric Mackey at a local elementary school, and you know, they were really happy about 4th grade. 4th grade really did well. Reading scores didn't really change a whole lot, but they didn't go down. You know, the national picture is pretty gloomy. If you look at the national headlines, there's not a lot of good to say about what the NAEP scores, what the trends are showing. Kids are really still struggling, so to see our scores improve was really exciting.
Yeah, that is exciting. And I know we're not supposed to really treat it like the, you know, AP top 25 rankings or whatever, but
right.
there's, you know, human nature is like that.
Sure.
And so when I see that our 4th grade math scores are 32nd, 32 in the country of 50 states, hey, that's pretty good. I mean, I think most Alabamians who are used to being ranked, you know, are always seeing those really low rankings, to be 32nd, that's not bad, and it's our highest yet, right?
It is for 4th grade math. It's huge. We've just never been that high in the rankings, and it's true that other states have fallen, but you know, we dealt with COVID just like other states did, and our kids are still improving.
Now I know we'll get to 8th grade in a minute, but I know that, you know, this state, this legislature, Dr. Mackey talked about it, Governor Ivey, have all made a focus on math and reading in early grades. You had the Literacy Act in 2019. You had the Numeracy Act. I guess that was 22?
I think so,
Yeah.
yes.
But all focused on those early grades. You've done a ton of reporting on this. Do you think that some of this really promising news can be attributed to that focus on Numeracy Act, Literacy Act in those early grades?
It can be, you know, because I think what it's doing, it's offering teachers training, right? Teachers are learning a new way to teach reading. Teachers are learning new ways to teach young children about how to manipulate numbers, you know. But we also cannot overlook that in 2019, Alabama updated our math standards. It was kind of controversial at the time. It went through a little bit of a different process than it had previously, but Dr. Mackey was fairly new at that point as state superintendent, and he said, we need to align our math standards with what the NAEP thinks is important. You know, it's not teaching to the test, it's saying, what does NAEP say that you know, our children should be able to do math-wise by the 4th grade? And we also changed the test. got a new test, a more honest test.
The ACAP, what they take every year? Okay.
Yes, yes. And you may recall math scores dropped. Fewer kids were proficient on the ACAP, and folks were kind of upset. And I remember Dr. Mackey saying, "This is a harder test." And I thought, okay. You always wonder, is that true? But it does appear that it is true.
But you've got to have that assessment. You've got to have that measuring stick in order to make progress. And that first time might be tough. But I think everybody in this building is really excited to see these numbers. But they're not all rosy. Right. Let's talk about the 8th grade. Both reading and math, we continue to struggle there. Yes. What was said at this news conference? What's being said about that? And I guess we're not the only state, but what's going on in 8th grade with those scores?
Gosh, it would be lovely to know, right? But we just have never been able to get out of that bottom rung of states. We are 45th, 52nd, 47th, 49th. Dr. Mackey did talk a good bit about we need to invest more heavily in the middle grades, lower class sizes, high quality professional development for teachers. He even mentioned, cell phones and social media not being a good influence on 13-year-olds, 13, 14-year-olds. So he really does want some new focus. He actually used the phrase with me that, we need to rethink middle grade education. And I'm anxious to see what they have in mind.
Yeah, that is interesting. And because, this is a 4th grade, 8th grade test every 2 years, right?
Yes.
So in 4 years, today's 4th graders will be in the 8th grade. So you really can see, kind of what kind of progress they've made.
Absolutely.
We're out of time. Thanks so much for your coverage on this. And it's an exciting day, lots of progress, but lots of work to do.
Yes, thanks, Todd.
We'll be right back.
You're watching Alabama Public Television.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. Joining me next is the Speaker of the House, Nathaniel Ledbetter. Mr. Speaker, thanks for coming on the show.
It's good to be here. Seems like we're back. Everything's going fast speed again.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, session is a few days away.
That's right.
Are we ready?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, our staff's worked extremely hard, and the chairmen and the members have been working through the off season. We've had a lot of things going on, so I think we're ready.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you, what goes into preparing for a legislative session? It's 30 legislative days, meaning the days that you're in the chair with the gavel in the chamber. That doesn't count committee days unless y'all choose to. All within 105 calendar days. So you're really talking about next Tuesday until May, May 19th or so. So it's a short period of time relatively, but a lot has to happen. So what goes into preparing to make sure that those days are maximized in terms of efficiency?
Well, yeah, I mean, we'll have a plan going forward. We've already got the schedule the first 2 weeks what we're wanting to do. I mean, we try to get ahead of the game, and it's something that we've been working on with the staff. We've spent a lot of time in Montgomery over the last 3 weeks, especially going over those issues that we want to try to address. Last couple of days, I opened it up to members. All the members that wanted to come, sit down, talk about bills they had, we could go over that, and we've done that. We had a number of members come in and discuss the legislation that they're interested in. So it kind of gives us a chance to set the agenda and focus on what we're going to be heading into. So, we're blessed to have a great staff, and we got a great leadership team. So they do a really good job. We had a retreat with our leadership group 2 weeks ago, I guess now, and had them there. It went good. It kind of gives us a chance we did it away from the Capitol and out on a rural farm, and just had a chance to sit back and really have a conversation on what we see coming, what can we do to make it better. I mean, Speaker, that's my question to my leadership team and the members. How can we make what you're doing better? And so we have that conversation, kind of look and see what's coming down the tracks and hear what their interest is and what they think may be happening. So we've been doing that for quite some time now. I mean, it's not like it's just going to start Tuesday. We've been working on it for actually a few months now, and we'll see the work come into play starting Tuesday. But the cake's already been mixed.
Yeah, it's interesting, and you're right. Everybody has their own district with their own issues, and so they come to Montgomery wanting to advocate for those things. That's right. That's really important. I do want to get to those issues, but I'm reminded that you have a new counterpart upstairs in the Senate,
Yes.
Garland Gudger. That's a big new endeavor for him. Have you had any advice for him? You came in as Speaker a couple of years ago, brand new.
I did. I mean, I think that the advantage I had worked so closely with Speaker McCutcheon. We were really close, and as Majority Leader, I had a chance to work with him on a daily basis. And Garland, he's got to learn on the fly, and so he will. I think he's sharp enough. Him and I have talked a number of times. And I told him, I said, listen, I'm going to be your biggest fan. I mean, I want to be happy in the way I can, and he's got a good heart, and I think he's going to do a good job. I look forward to working with him. Of course, it'd be remiss not to mention Greg Reed. Greg was a great guy, and I enjoyed working with him immensely, and he and I are really close friends because of the time we spent together. And Garland and I, we kind of, when he first come in, we become friends then, and have been fishing a few times together, and have done some fun things together. So I know how he'll be. I think he'll be a good leader and he'll be strong. So look forward to working with him.
So important, that relationship between the House and the Senate, especially late in the session as bills start, really getting tense. Let's talk about these issues. I keep hearing about crime, especially violent crime in cities, and what we can do to address that. You've talked about this before. The governor's talking about it now. What might we see in terms of a package of bills specifically on the issue of crime?
Well, I think we'll have a package of about 9 bills. We finished that up yesterday as far as what it looks like. We kind of put down, as we were talking about the structure of time, how we want to get it out. We want to get out, what we'd like to do is get them out before the first break, and I think we can. So we've been working on those for a number of weeks now. And certainly the governor's staff and my staff have worked closely together trying to come up with a package we feel like would be good for our state. One of the things, Todd, over the last few years, we've been blessed in Alabama with the growth. We've created over 80,000 jobs with investment over $50 billion in our state. But the concerns we're having is the violent crime in our state may slow that down or may halt it. I mean, if you're in this areas where that's going on, it hurts your property value, it hurts retail sales. I mean, statistics show that. That's not just us saying it. It shows that. It hurts us.
It's depressing. It's a morale thing, right?
It is. It's depressing, as far as the community and the state and people that wants to move companies into your state, they see that. They get reluctant because of it. So we thought, well, they've put the task force together here in Montgomery. Secretary Taylor and Sheriff Cunningham, along with the city, has done that and have done a tremendous job, and it's working. And so we've had several meetings with them, and they have been at the table when we've talked about these issues. We've had Sheriff Association, the League Municipality, the County Commission. Everybody's been at the table, and I couldn't compliment the governor's staff more because they have been engaged with us from day one when we started this package. And it's like I told the governor, she'd come up to my district. We had lunch one day. I said, it doesn't matter about the credit. I said, you can have the bills that we work on because what matters is that we get it accomplished and we're able to slow down crime in our state. And I think it's a good package. I think we will.
You talk about these task forces, so it's like the state, the county, the city kind of all partnering together because there is a shortage of police officers in a lot of our large cities.
That's right.
So I hear you, it has been effective. So is it policy and funding maybe that the state can lend to make these task forces more operational?
It is. I mean, you're going to see a little bit of both. I mean, you're going to see the funding maybe to continue the task force full time. I think it gives the opportunity to use it across the state in different areas of the state where we've got a rise in crime or we've got violence that's uptick. So it'd give a chance to put those guys in there and do their job. I think you'll see something for retention for police officers. It's important. I think you'll see something for protection of police officers. I mean, let's face it, we have vilified this country. If you see it on the news and everything's going on, we've vilified police officers and the people that protect and serve us. And I think we need to show in Alabama we don't feel that way. We need to support and back the men and women in blue. And I think with this package, it's going to show that we do that. And I'm excited about that and excited about the outcome.
Switching gears to Washington, there is so much fast pace coming out of the Trump administration, the new Congress. It's kind of hard to keep up with, honestly, but so much of what we do in Alabama kind of depends on, it kind of trickles down from there. I'm thinking about immigration policy. I'm going to be talking with State Senator Elliott a little bit later about some of his proposals. But what do you see happening in terms of this session, maybe as sort of a reflection of what's happening in D.C.?
Well, I think there will be, and that's one thing we talked about was the fact that somebody asked me the question the other day, very similar to that, and that's the thing about Alabama, because what we've done in the past few years, we're already doing the things that he's moving into, doing away with DEI and protecting the border. We've passed bills to protect our state border because we knew, every state's become a border state. And certainly applaud him and the work he's doing on the border because it's making a difference already. And he's hit the ground running, and we'll be mindful of what the president's doing, and we certainly want to be beneficial, and we want the people of Alabama to benefit off of what's going on. I think we've got great opportunities with him in there. I mean, I think the Space Command could come back to Alabama, which would be a big win for our state, as you know. I mean, the growth in the Huntsville and North Alabama area has been phenomenal, but if we had that to come back in, it would be a bigger step for our state. So there's a lot of positive for this state, and I'm kind of looking forward to see how it goes.
Yeah. Well, I found it interesting because, I went to the Democratic leaders' press conference the other day, and a lot of what they had to say was in reaction to Trump. Mm-hmm. And then I'm seeing legislation get filed on the Republican side that a lot of it is like kind of mimicking a little bit of Trump. So it always kind of bleeds down a little bit, some performative kind of things. But y'all have got to do the blocking and tackling of the legislation,
right.
the budgets, the things that aren't necessarily headline grabbing. And so how does that work? You've got to balance the politics and everybody's sort of political things, but also the government of the business of state government.
Well, I think a lot of times that gets lost in politics. I mean, it really does, and I see that. I guess from my standpoint, I'm probably more of on that side of the fence as far as policy and government and budgets than I am even the politics of it. But if we do a good job here, it helps the people of the state, and budgeting is a tremendous process of that. And really, at the end of the day, that's all our job is to pass the budgets.
Right.
The governor makes the recommendations in her budget. She sends them across the street. Our budget chairs and the committees have been engaged for weeks, months now, actually, looking at those budgets to make sure that they fill the needs that's needed in different agencies, but also making sure that they're not wasteful with the money. And I think if you look at what's went on with our budget process over the last few years, there's no question about that. Chairman Garrett, Chairman Orr, Albritton, and Reynolds with budget chairs have done an excellent job, and they're very mindful of the funding that we have, and it's flattening out a little bit. It's not going to be as robust as it has been. So I think with that comes more challenges, but they do a great job, and like you said, that process has started months ago, and we're excited to be where we're at. I mean, I wish we were a little better shape in the general fund. We had some expenses we didn't see coming, and that'll happen. So I think that's why we try to keep money put back, and we have, because you never know when that rainy day is going to come and you need it. So I applaud our members and our budget chairs and their committees for what they've done.
Mm-hmm. One more thing I wanted to ask you about, and this is some good news, that is the NAEP scores. Our education scores came out, the nation's report card, some really positive news for especially the fourth graders in Alabama.
Right.
The best gains in the country
right.
in math.
Yeah.
So I know that the legislature has done work on this in terms of the Literacy Act back in 2019, the Numeracy Act in 2022. Do you see these scores, this good news as, I don't know, proof positive of what policies like that? They're not easy bills to pass,
That's right.
and investments in those bills to lawmakers to finally see some results.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I remember we were at a meeting probably 2-3 years ago, and one of the senators, I won't mention who it was, he's not in the Senate anymore, but he had mentioned, he said, I've been here 12 years, and we've been trying to help education ever since then. I've been here long enough to get through high school, but he said we hadn't done it yet. But to see what's going on now since we've passed the Numeracy Act and since we passed the Literacy Act, and to get those numbers back like we got yesterday is exciting. I mean, it shows that the policies that we've done and what we've tried to accomplish is definitely working. And, Terry Collins has been an advocate for a lot of that. Alan Baker has done a great job with some of those policies. And to see what's happening and the hard work they put in, you're right, they wasn't all positive. They had a lot of pushback on, especially when you try to hold somebody's child back
Sure.
in the third grade. So it was difficult. but look at what's happened because of it. And I get it. I'm getting up yesterday morning, about to get in the shower, and my phone dings, and it's Dr. Mackey, Eric Mackey, our state superintendent. He said, "Man, you got to see this. This is awesome." So he's excited about it. Certainly appreciate the job his board is doing, and I think that we're going to continue to see that rise.
It's got to be so encouraging because it does it turning around an aircraft carrier kind of thing. It's so when you finally see some good news of that can be attributed to policies you pass, has to be really encouraging.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, we're out of time, but thank you so much for coming on the show. We'll see you very soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
And good luck with the session.
Thanks, Todd.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is State Senator Chris Elliott from Baldwin County. Senator, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Y'all thawed out down there?
We have 8 inches of snow in Orange Beach. That was something I never thought I would see.
Yeah, I probably haven't seen. I mean, I'm guessing the roads were shut down. Everything. Y'all aren't built for. We're none of us really in Alabama, but certainly on the coast, built for that.
Yeah, that's just not something we see. And I had some folks griping about, why don't local governments have the equipment for this? Well, you wouldn't want your local government to invest in something they see once every 150 years. You know? So
snow plows in Orange Beach.
Just sit tight for 2 days, and it was 65 degrees 3 days later, and it all melted. So.
Well, hopefully it was a little bit of fun.
It was fun indeed. The snowman on the beach was something else.
Session. Right around the corner, be here any minute. I wanted to talk to you about the issue of immigration because I know we've done some reporting on you and some of your colleagues focusing on this. Y'all went to the southern border, I guess it was last year?
It was.
Kind of informing what we might see in the legislative session. Everything's changed since then, though, because there's a new presidential administration. I think that is one of the top things they're changing in terms of federal enforcement. So, all that being said, what might we see in terms of legislation on the issue of immigration this session?
Well, thanks for bringing that back up. And of course, we were here on the show just after we got back. Senator Kitchen, Senator Weaver, Senator Bell, Senator Kelly, and myself went down there, and then some House members as well. And so what we have been doing since then is really collaborating on what we as a state can do to support what our federal partners now are doing in D.C. And so what we've heard from folks that don't like immigration issues is, it's going to cost so much money to round up illegal immigrants. And so what we have tried to do is say, look, when local law enforcement makes contact with these people, when state law enforcement makes contact with these people or finds folks that are here illegally, let's make sure we're assisting our federal partners as opposed to not. And so there is a slew of different pieces of legislation that House and Senate have been working on, trying to combine and condense, that are state laws that will allow us to detain, hold, and wait for our federal partners to do their job on their side of things. We're here to assist and complement what the feds are doing.
So are you saying it's going to be kind of a package of bills, not just one big bill?
No, I'm looking right now at 17 different pieces of legislation.
Goodness.
I hope to condense that down to about 5 or 6 per chamber. And so, again, Representative Robbins, Representative Colvin, Gina Ross, and others have been working really hard on condensing and finding where there's some commonality in some of these pieces of legislation. And I expect that we'll have a day or so in either chamber to really kind of go through these issues. Everything from making sure if you have a driver's license from another state, that it's from a state that actually figured out if you were here legally to begin with, right? There's some bills that deal with DNA swabs of folks that are here illegally. One of the things we have a problem with is they have no identification. We don't know who they are, and we have no way of telling them apart from somebody that says they have the exact same name. And so I know Senator Bell's working on that one. Some bills that deal with presenting a forged instrument to a law enforcement officer, some things like that that are just meant to dissuade illegal immigrants from being here in Alabama. And if they're going to stay, we're going to hold them, and we're going to hold them until the feds get hold of them.
I was going to get to that because years ago it was the term self-deportation was kind of thrown around a lot. Like if it's just difficult in general to exist, to live in a place like Alabama as an illegal immigrant, then you would self-deport. Some criticism of that. Is that sort of the point, or is it more of an enforcement thing? Or is it a deterrent, or is it both?
Yeah, great question, and I think the answer is it's both, really. And so if you're an illegal immigrant in Alabama, the message is clear, and that is you shouldn't be here. You're gonna face a slew of state penalties if you stay here in Alabama illegally, and it's going to be very hard for you to live legally day in, day out in Alabama if you're not here in the country legally. And so, yeah, thanks for coming. You've worn out your welcome. It's time to go. And then two, if you stay, there are going to be a slew of state laws that really increase the likelihood that we're going to catch you being here illegally, that we're going to detain you for violating a state law, and that we're going to hand you off to our federal partners to handle you through the immigration side of things.
It occurs to me, we've been here before. I remember 2011 very well. It was right after that big 2010 election. One of the top items on the list of that handshake agenda was Alabama enacting what was dubbed, and I think it was truthfully dubbed, the toughest, strictest immigration law in the country. Celebrated by a lot of Republicans, protested by a lot of immigrant groups and things. What happened as a result of that, though, courts got involved. A lot of the law was scaled back. A lot of it found to be unworkable. Legislature had to come back the next year and clean some of that up. So the reason I bring that up is, does that experience inform what y'all are doing? Are y'all trying to avoid some of the mistakes that were made during that legislative process?
Yeah, so we've analyzed the Beeson-Hammond Act and what was successful, what stayed, what was enjoined by federal courts, and what is still on the books. And we've also looked at these bills through that lens, if you will.
Okay.
And so we're trying to focus, again, informed is a good word, being informed by that experience to make sure that we're laser focused on certain areas where the state does have jurisdiction, because immigration is a federal issue. But presenting a forged document or a false document to a law enforcement officer is certainly a state issue and can be a state issue. And so we're trying to laser focus on areas where we can pinpoint issues that are state issues, but that certainly relate to immigration status.
It did kind of seem like back then that it was an experiment, right? That Alabama was one of a handful of states that it was like, let's see if we can do this. A lot of time has passed, and so other states like Texas and Florida have definitely gotten into the. Do you think that helps at all in terms of, okay, this is not a legislative experiment from a think tank? There are some concrete examples out there that have already been worked out in the courts.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was our point in going to the border in Texas. It wasn't to go see the wall. It wasn't a field trip, right? It was to go talk to Texas legislators and see in Texas what they had done as a state that was successful, what they had done that was unsuccessful, and where we could plug into the immigration debate on the state level that stayed out of federal jurisdiction, frankly. And Texas has been, even back during the Biden administration, admittedly, had been very successful in deterring people from coming to Texas. And you saw illegal migrants going other places than Texas, mainly because of what Governor Abbott and the Texas legislature had done. And so our legislation is in part modeled after some of the things they have done, certainly what Florida's done as well. We're trying to be very cerebral in our approach to this. It is not a shotgun approach, despite the number of pieces of legislation, but very targeted.
So looking at the federal level, I mean, you can't turn on the TV without seeing roundups going on. Yeah. The ICE and Homeland Security seem to be really targeted on, gangs, violent criminals, those with a criminal background, really going after them first. It's hard to really argue with that approach. But there's concern about, down the road, it's not just those with a criminal record, it's just basically anybody. So I guess that begs the question, should there be a difference between someone who has come here with, committed crimes, gang-related, fentanyl, human trafficking, we've talked about these issues a lot, right, versus, the one that is just really coming here to work, trying to get a roofing job and already has roots. Should we, I know that's a federal issue, but should they be treated differently in your eyes?
Well, certainly I think there should be a difference in prioritization, right? And I think the Trump administration is certainly focused on violent offenders first and foremost. But let's be clear about this. If you're here illegally in the United States, you have broken the law. If you're here illegally in the state of Alabama, then you've broken the law. And if you do any of the things here that we're going to try to pass, then you will be breaking the law as well. And so to say that these are, immigrants that are here that haven't broken the law is not necessarily, true. I want to be careful about how we do this and targeted about how we do this. But I'm pretty firm on the fact that if you're here and you've broken the law in order to be here, then you need to go home.
Switching gears, while we have time, I want to ask you about occupational licensing reform. This is another one of your bailiwicks. So much has been uncovered since y'all really kind of started, lifting the can on this thing. Boards and commissions, how they're governed, how they're funded, the fees that go into all this. It's a really complicated subject. But can you kind of give the high points? Because I'm assuming you're going to bring back your legislation this year.
I am, and it will essentially be the legislation that passed out of Senate committee last year, and this has been incremental. We didn't get here overnight, and we're not going to fix it overnight. But we've got a problem. It's a mess, and it is a bloated group of bureaucracies here within state government that private individuals are frequently preying on and have a profit motivation. And what we've seen is, as the Sunset Committee and as contract review starts to really question these agencies, question these boards, question these executive directors, you see some abuses.
Interesting. Definitely something to watch, as is your immigration package. We'll be following that closely. Senator, we're out of time. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon when the session begins.
Next week. Here we go.
Okay. We'll be right back.
Since 1997, Alabama Public Television has provided programs, services, and resources to child care professionals, teachers, and parents. Visit aptv.org/education to learn more.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. Joining me next is State Representative Juandalynn Givan from Birmingham. Representative, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me again.
Absolutely. Well, you've got a lot going on.
I do.
You've announced your campaign for mayor of Birmingham. We
I
might
have.
get into that a little bit later. But in your capacity as state representative right now, with the session coming up, we're hearing a lot about the issue of crime, and specifically violent crime in cities. You've had a lot to say about this. You've actually sponsored legislation pre-filed for this session. I wanted to see, what does your legislation attempt to do?
First of all, thank you for having me again. It's always a pleasure. Listen, crime is an issue here in the state of Alabama, in particular in Birmingham and certainly throughout Jefferson County. Last year, the city of Birmingham actually exceeded its all-time history of recorded killings within the city. Since 1933, we moved to almost 159 people that were killed in the capacity of gun violence and violent crime in the city of Birmingham. And although there's an argument that violent crime is down, killing isn't. So killing is the case. We moved from being dubbed last year of Murderham to Killingham. Birmingham should be recognized and considered and always called Birmingham because it was known as the Magic City, a city that in some instances with regard to crime has lost its luster, but we're going to try to bring the magic back. So I've sponsored a piece of legislation, several pieces. I've sponsored legislation on gun violence before, but this is a little bit different. I'm structuring it around a Class 1 municipality. For right now in the state of Alabama, Birmingham is still noted as the only Class 1 municipality.
Okay, there's like a certain size?
Yes, certain size and the demographics thereof. So Birmingham is still a Class 1. So my bill is to address the bump stocks, and of course we all know what those are. Those are the apparatuses that you attach to a gun, just a regular gun, that will create a high-powered mechanism for shooting or spraying. In other words, it creates a machine gun effect. So not only do we have a problem in Birmingham with those, they're called also switches.
Glock switches.
Switches. Yeah. So we're now focusing in solely on that Class 1 to address that issue that would add a criminal penalty on for anyone who purchases those type of apparatuses for the purpose of doing violent killing and crimes. And then, of course, HB 69, which is to address the issue of illegal guns and distribution. Listen, Birmingham has a problem with the illegal distribution of guns. Until we treat it like we did back in the day, I don't know if you're old enough to remember the crack cocaine era. Well, it wasn't until when crack cocaine was so prevalent throughout the communities that there were so many task force created that went after the distributor of the drugs.
Not
itself.
Just the user.
Not just the user, not just the local dope man, as they used to call them, or the supplier on the street. It had to be the distributor. That's the person who's bringing it in. That's the one who's getting to the person on the street. That's the person who's getting not only to the person on the street, but also the consumer. They have to be the supplier to the person on the street. So we need to get to who's distributing these guns, where are they coming from, why is there such a black market now for these types of apparatuses and stolen guns. So this legislation, HB 69, will add an enhanced penalty for the stolen gun and the distributor, and create if it's passed, it will impose a Class B felony on those individuals. Until you attack it that way, I don't care what legislation you pass, it's for naught. And the other thing that we need to begin to really talk about, even if we look at something like a Class 1, this permitless carry. It is causing a hamper in the ability of local law enforcement to be able to see a gun, if a gun is in the vehicle, to do a check and run it, because now the law says you can carry a gun, a permitless carry. You don't have to have a permit. So if you stop me, for instance, and I have a gun, and law enforcement sees it, there's nothing that tells law enforcement that they have to do a check on that gun, because we allow for a permitless carry. So those are things that are problematic.
Well, I was just talking with a speaker, and he's focused on crime too, including some of the same things you're talking about. So it kind of sounds like there might be some bipartisan
We're at that point.
Here.
There is an urgency of now for the city of Birmingham. Listen, the speaker is overtaxed with calls from corporate leaders and individuals who's calling him to say, listen, our bottom line depends on supply and demand throughout the city of Birmingham. And because everybody now is plagued with this issue of the crime in Birmingham, listen, there's one color that is universal, and that's green. It's not black, it's not white, it's money. And when you begin to impact the goods and services and money and demand in areas.
You're saying that the violence is impacting the economy.
It's impacting the economy to a great extent. Things that could come to Birmingham or to Alabama. When you're outside of Alabama, I don't care where you're from, you could be from Timbuktu. When you say that you live in Alabama, most people think Birmingham. That's just a realization of where we are. You may then go into a deeper conversation that you're from Montgomery or you're from Pickens County or whatever, but the realization, most people universally know of Birmingham, Alabama because of its history, the same way with Montgomery. So the realization of where we are is we must create and make sure that we maintain livable communities. We must protect the public. I don't care if I'm a Republican, I don't care, if I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican, vice versa. At the end of the day, we all have a duty to make sure that we create and live in areas and make sure that the areas that the people we represent are areas that are considered safe. But right now you have your little old ladies who are afraid to garden in their gardens. You have folks that would normally go out after 6 o'clock now that are not going out. Why? Because Birmingham also has a problem in that they only have roughly 300 and close to 70 law enforcement officers, sworn officers. And I want to be clear because I want the public to understand we're dealing with sworn officers. Birmingham only has about 300 and something sworn officers, and for the size of the city that they have, it should definitely be upwards toward more of 1,000 officers versus 300.
Wow.
There's a policing issue, and unfortunately the criminals know it. So it's not that Birmingham is so bad. It's not that West End is so bad. It's not that the West Side is so bad. But also, Todd, if you would allow me, we also have to deal with the fact that Birmingham should not be a city of two sides. the south side versus all of the other sides, or downtown and the south side versus all of the other sides. Birmingham should be one metropolis, one city, and crime should be treated the same way in all of those 99 neighborhoods and 23 communities. And right now it's not. That's what we saw with the shooting that took place on First Avenue. All of a sudden you have the spokesperson for the Birmingham Police Department saying, we will not allow our infrastructure to be violated. Well, infrastructure is everywhere in all of the neighborhoods, and we got to do that in Montgomery. We've got to protect the infrastructure in all 99 neighborhoods and 23 communities throughout Birmingham.
Well, it looks like violent crime, addressing it is shaping up to be the signature issue of this legislative session. We're out of time for now, but I want to have you back because I want to get an update on Birmingham Southern. But look, legislative session starts Tuesday, so there's plenty of time.
I'm ready. We are ready to go. We are coming here to once again do our job for the people. The question is, what about us? What about the people? And that's what we focus in on. So I'm always delighted to be here and speak a word of truth. I tell anybody when I do come on, you do your research, fact find, and fact check me. You'll see what I'm saying is absolutely the truth and on point.
Absolutely. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. Remember that starting on Monday, Capitol Journal goes to nightly coverage of the Alabama Legislature's regular session. We'll be on the air Monday through Thursday at 10:30 after your local news here on APT. And Tuesday night for the governor's State of the State address. We'll cover that speech live here on APT. Our coverage begins at 5:30. The speech will begin at 6, and we'll also have the Democratic response after that. So please join us for the State of the State Tuesday night here on APT. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.